You're standing around a fire. It's 50,000 BC, the sun just went down, and there's no phone, no streaming, no dread about an inbox. There's just you, the flames, and the thick, choking smoke curling straight into your face. Your eyes water, your throat burns. Every instinct in your body says pull back, but you don't. You lean in and you breathe it in on purpose. So when did ancient humans start smoking? Not cigarettes, not cigars, not the guy outside your office. We're talking about the very first time a human being deliberately pulled burning smoke into their own lungs. And here's the part that should keep you exactly where you are. Once they started, they could not stop. Not for 50,000 years. And by the time this is over, you're going to understand why the thing in your pocket right now is older than farming, older than writing, older than almost everything we call civilization. This isn't the story of a bad habit. It's the story of the strangest thing our species has ever done to itself, over and over, on every continent, for reasons that had nothing to do with pleasure. And it starts, like everything, with fire. Because before you can smoke anything, you need fire. And our history with fire is far older than 50,000 years. In 2012, archaeologist Francesco Berna and his team dug burnt plant ash and charred bone out of Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. It dates back roughly 1 million years. A million years. That number is almost impossible to hold in your head. For tens of thousands of generations, your ancestors lived inside caves with almost no ventilation and a fire burning in the middle of the room. They breathed wood smoke every single day of their lives. Their lungs were coated in black carbon before they could walk. It was a slow, constant poison, and it should have been nothing but a hazard. But that daily lungful of smoke did something no one planned. It made smoke ordinary. It made smoke safe. For a million years, we were the one animal on Earth that walked toward the fire instead of away from it. Every other creature in that landscape ran from smoke. We slept in it. So by the time a human finally decided to breathe smoke on purpose, the fear that should have stopped them was already gone. We were preloaded. We just didn't have a reason yet. And then we found one. In that same year, 2012, scientist Karen Hardy published a chemical analysis of Neanderthal teeth from El Sidrón cave in Spain, 50,000 years old. Trapped inside the hardened plaque on those teeth, she found something that made no sense for a caveman's diet. Traces of yarrow and chamomile. Plants with 0 calories. Plants so bitter they make you gag. There is no reason on Earth to eat them unless you already know something. And these Neanderthals did. Yarrow and chamomile are medicine. Hardy had found the oldest hard proof that humans were treating their own bodies with specific plants chosen on purpose tens of thousands of years ago. So think about what these people already understood. The world was not just food and danger. The world was a chemistry set. Some plants filled your stomach. Some plants killed your pain. Some plants did strange things to your head, and they were figuring out which was which, one bitter mouthful at a time, sitting right next to an open fire. So here's how it probably happened the very first time. A hunter tosses a handful of that bitter medicine down by the coals to dry it out for later. The leaves catch. A thin ribbon of smoke lifts off them and drifts straight into her face. She breathes it in, out of nothing but bad luck. And for one strange moment, the ache in her joints goes quiet. She has no idea why. She can't possibly know, but her body just filed it away. And the next time the pain comes back, she remembers exactly where she was sitting and exactly what was burning. That's the moment, not a discovery, an accident noticed. Because once you've felt it, the jump from eating a plant to burning a plant is almost nothing. And it comes with a terrifying advantage. When you swallow a medicine, it takes an hour to work. When you breathe it, the chemical crosses from your lungs into your blood in about 10 seconds. Faster than eating, faster than chewing, almost as fast as a thought. Your ancestors had just found the quickest door into their own brains that exists. And they were never going to close it again. Everything that comes next in this story, every ritual, every medicine, every addiction, every death, grows out of that one accidental breath. That is the moment our species quietly changed forever. We had become the only creature on Earth that could reach inside its own head and turn something off. And a thing like that does not stay a secret for long. But when did they aim all of this at one plant in particular? When did they find tobacco? In 2021, archaeologist Darren Duke found the answer buried in the Utah desert. At a site called Wishbone, he dug into an Ice Age hearth 12,300 years old. That's older than the pyramids by 7,000 years. Older than the wheel, older than the first farm. And down in that ancient ash, he found 4 tiny charred seeds. Wild tobacco. These were not people rolling cigarettes. They were probably chewing the leaves or brewing them. But every time they spat those toxic seeds into the fire, the air around them filled with nicotine, and they breathed it and they noticed. They noticed the burning plant reached into their heads and turned a dial. And once you've noticed that, you don't leave it alone. You start to want control. You start to engineer, which is exactly what happened next. In 2018, archaeologist Stephen Carmody analyzed a stone pipe from the Flint River in Alabama, 3,300 years old. And inside it, sealed in the residue, he found the oldest undisputed chemical fingerprint of nicotine ever recorded in a pipe. Now, a pipe sounds simple. It isn't. A pipe is a piece of precision engineering. It separates the fire from the drug. It pulls the burning heat off to one side, cools the smoke, and lets you draw the pure chemical straight down into your chest, exactly as hard or as gently as you want. It is the first dose control technology in human history. Ancient people had built a machine whose only purpose was to deliver a chemical to a human brain more efficiently. Sound familiar? By 1200 years ago, this was not a rare experiment anymore. Archaeologist Shannon Tushingham proved in the journal PNAS that hunter-gatherers across the Columbia River Basin were smoking wild tobacco in stone pipes, systematically, as a normal part of daily life. And this was not the smooth, mild, sweetened tobacco you know. It was wild. It was harsh. It was genuinely toxic. So line up the dates for a second, because they are staggering. 50,000 years ago, Neanderthals were already burning medicine. 12,000 years ago, before a single field on Earth had ever been planted, hunters in Utah were breathing tobacco. 3,000 years ago, they had built the pipe. This habit is not some footnote at the end of human history. It is older than almost all of it. When people ask when we started smoking, they expect an answer measured in centuries. The real answer is measured in ice ages, which is where this whole story cracks open into a mystery, because nicotine is a poison, not a metaphorical poison, a real one. Plants don't make nicotine for us, they make it to survive. Nicotine is a nerve agent a plant grows in its own leaves to paralyze and kill any insect stupid enough to take a bite. It is a weapon. And think about what kind of weapon. A plant is rooted to one spot. It can't run, it can't hide, it can't fight back. So over millions of years, it evolved a chemistry so vicious it can kill a beetle in seconds without ever moving a muscle. That's not gardening, that's warfare in slow motion. And here is the irony sitting underneath this entire story. Humans did not defeat that weapon. We picked it up. We took the single most toxic thing the tobacco plant ever built to defend itself, and we decided we wanted it in our own lungs. And when a human being breathes that weapon in, the body reacts exactly the way you'd expect it to react to a poison. Your lungs burn, your throat clamps shut, you cough, your eyes stream. Every alarm you have goes off at once. Forcing that toxic cloud into your chest goes against every survival instinct evolution ever handed you. And yet humans did it, on purpose, everywhere, for thousands of years. So why? Why would our ancestors override every warning their own body could give them again and again across the entire planet? The answer is not in the smoke. The answer is alive, and it is crawling around inside them right now. In 2014, anthropologist Ed Hagen and his colleague Casey Roulette went to the Congo Basin to study a modern hunter-gatherer society called the Aka. And Hagen noticed something odd. Almost every single man was smoking wild tobacco, constantly, all day long. So he did what a curious scientist does. He collected saliva and stool samples from those men and sent them to a lab. And the results stopped him cold. The men with the most nicotine in their bodies had the fewest worms in their guts, parasites, helminths. And to understand why that matters, you have to understand what these worms actually are. They hook into the wall of your intestine. They drink your blood. They drain your strength. They cause severe anemia. And they kill you slowly, from the inside, over years. For almost every human being who has ever lived, they were not a rare disease. They were normal. They were in the water, in the food, in the body of nearly everyone you loved, silently stealing your life from the day you were born. You almost never think about them, because you happened to be born after we solved it. Your ancestors were not that lucky. They spent their whole lives sharing their bodies with something that was eating them. You would have been tired every single day and never known why. Pale, weak, watching your own children grow up hollow-eyed and slow, and you would have had no word for the thing doing it, no way to see it, no way to fight it, just a quiet, invisible drain that everyone you loved was fighting too, and that almost everyone in the end was losing. And then Hagen realized the thing that ties this entire story together. Nicotine is a poison, yes, but so is a worm. And it turns out nicotine poisons the worm faster than it poisons you. It forces the parasites to release their grip and flush out, long before the dose is ever high enough to seriously harm the person breathing it. Now you might be thinking, that's one group of men, in one forest. A coincidence. So did Hagen. So a year later, his team went looking somewhere else entirely, at a completely different plant on a different continent. And they found the exact same thing. Heavy cannabis smokers carried fewer parasites too. Different plant, different chemistry, different part of the world, same result. And that is the part that should genuinely stop you. Because these people don't have a pharmacy. They have no pills, no diagnosis, no idea that worms even exist as a scientific fact. They don't smoke to cure anything. They just crave it. The craving is the medicine. Your body worked out how to dose itself against a killer thousands of years before anyone on Earth knew what a parasite was. And it did it in the most cunning way possible. It turned the treatment into a hunger you can't explain and can't ignore. Your pull towards smoke may not be a weakness at all. For most of human history, it was your own body quietly keeping you alive. But this is where the trap snaps shut, and it's the reason we could never put it down. Because once nicotine is inside your brain, it doesn't only fight the worms, it slips into a set of tiny locks that were built for one of your own natural signals, a messenger called acetylcholine, and it turns a key it was never meant to have. And every time it does, your brain releases a small, warm pulse of dopamine. Reward, do that again. So your brain learns. It learns that this exact smoke, this exact plant means relief relief and reward, and it files that lesson somewhere far below thinking, somewhere you cannot argue with. That is the trap. The very same chemical that protected your ancestors' bodies also rewired their brains to need it. Medicine on the way in, addiction on the way out. That is why, out of every plant on the entire planet, this is the one humans could never walk away from. It was never really about weakness or willpower. It was chemistry, doing precisely what it was built to do, to a brain that never stood a chance. And when you feel that pull yourself, on a bad day, in a parking lot, understand what you're actually feeling. You're running software 50,000 years old, written by a plant for a world that no longer exists. But if you think fighting invisible worms is a strange reason to fill your lungs with poison, you haven't seen what humans were willing to do with smoke when they turned it. Not on their bodies, but on their minds. High in the Pamir Mountains of western China, nearly 10,000 feet above the sea, there's a cemetery called Jirzankal. 2,500 years ago, people climbed all the way up into that thin, freezing air to bury someone they loved. And they did not just dig a grave and leave. They carried wooden bowls down into the tombs. They dropped burning hot stones inside. They laid specific green leaves across the glowing rocks. And then they leaned their faces into the thick cloud that rose up, and they breathed. And here's what that actually was. You're kneeling on frozen ground, 10,000 feet up, where the air is already so thin that every breath burns. The body in the grave in front of you belongs to someone you have loved your entire life. There are no words that help. There is no comfort coming. So you lean down over the bowl, into the heat rolling off the stones, and you pull the smoke deep into your chest, and you hold it. And for the first time since they died, the unbearable thing becomes just barely bearable. That is what these people found up there. Not a party, not a high for fun. An anesthetic for grief, in a world that offered them absolutely nothing else. In 2019, archaeologist Meng Ren published the chemistry of those bowls in the journal Science Advances. They were soaked in the residue of burned cannabis. It is the oldest undisputed proof anywhere on Earth of human beings inhaling cannabis smoke to get high. But the truly unsettling detail came next. Robert Spengler at the Max Planck Institute tested the wild cannabis that actually grows on that mountain, and it barely does anything. It has almost no psychoactive punch at all, which means these mourners were not grabbing weeds from beside the grave. They were selecting and almost certainly growing rare plants that hit far harder than anything nature was handing out for free. And think about what that requires. Somebody, generations earlier, had to notice that a few plants out of thousands did something stronger to the mind and then choose those and breed them on purpose for a chemical they could not see, could not name, and could only feel. That is agriculture. But it isn't agriculture aimed at the stomach. It is the first farming in human history aimed straight at human consciousness. They were not growing food. They were growing a way out of their own pain. And that single discovery on a frozen mountain quietly proved a story that historians had laughed at for 2,000 years. Because back in 440 BC, the Greek historian Herodotus described a nomadic people called the Scythians. He wrote that they would build small, sealed tents, throw hemp onto red-hot stones, and sit inside the trapped smoke, howling with pleasure. And for centuries, every serious scholar dismissed it as a traveler's tall tale. It was too strange. It was too wild. Nobody really did that. And then Jirzankal came out of the ground, and the smoke tents were real, and the hot stones were real, and the howling was real. Herodotus had been telling the plain truth the entire time. And this was not happening in only one corner of the world. On the other side of the planet, tobacco was becoming something the modern mind can barely recognize. For the Maya, and across the whole of the Amazon, tobacco was not a treat, and it was not a habit. It was holy, and it was strong. The species they used in its wild form can carry many times the nicotine of anything in a cigarette today, strong enough to send a person into visions, or convulsions, or straight through the door they believed stood between the living and the dead. Priests blew it over crops to bless them. Shamans breathed it to travel out of their own bodies. It was offered to gods, and to spirits, and to the dead, and it was handled with exactly the terror and respect a bridge like that deserves. And once you line all of it up, the pattern becomes almost frightening. The Neanderthals in a Spanish cave, the hunters in the Utah desert, the mourners frozen on a mountain in China, the Scythians in their tents, the Maya, the Amazon, the smoke against the toothache. These are people separated by oceans they could never cross, and languages they could never share, and thousands of years of time. And every single one of them, independently, found something to burn and breathe. Across India and the Pacific, they chewed betel until their mouths ran red. In the Amazon, they brewed vines into visions and ground other plants into snuff they blew straight up each other's noses. The plants changed from one valley to the next. The methods changed. The gods they thanked for it changed. The urge underneath never did. That cannot be a coincidence. It is written into what we are. We are the animal that discovered it could set a plant on fire and change what it feels like to be alive. Smoke was our first technology for editing our own minds. And nothing we have invented since, not alcohol, not any pill, not any screen, has ever loosened its grip. But even changing the living mind was not the strangest thing we did with smoke, because eventually we stopped using it it only on the living. We started using it to keep the dead. When a human body dies, the clock starts immediately. Within hours, bacteria move in and begin to eat the flesh. The body softens, then collapses, then disappears. For almost all of history, that was the final horror. You watched someone you loved simply dissolve in front of you. But wood smoke is full of carbon compounds, including chemicals called phenols, and phenols are a powerful natural antiseptic. Smoke dries the skin. It kills the bacteria. It stops the clock. And somewhere back in the Ice Age, a human being made a connection that changes everything. The same smoke they used to keep a dead deer from rotting could keep a dead person from rotting too. So they built wooden racks. They lifted their dead up over low, slow, smoky fires. And they let that toxic air seal the body shut. Done right, a body preserved this way keeps its skin, its hair, even a recognizable face for thousands of years. In 2025, a team led by archaeologist Xiao Chun-hung dated the oldest smoke-dried human bodies in Asia to more than 10,000 years ago. And it was not one lonely culture that stumbled onto it. It was many on different continents who never met. From the highlands of New Guinea to the frozen edges of the world, humans kept discovering the same impossible trick. In some of those highland villages, they did it so well and for so long that the smoked bodies of ancestors who died generations ago still sit on the cliffs above their homes today, dark and dry and preserved, watching over the descendants who carried them up there, and those descendants still climb up to visit them and talk to them. Smoke had become a wall between the people they loved and the rot that wanted to take them. It was the first thing our species ever found that could beat death, even a little. And we were never going to let go of a weapon like that, so we kept it for thousands of years. Long after the Scythians and their tents were forgotten, people still reached for smoke whenever the world turned on their bodies and they had nothing else. Take the worst pain of the medieval world, a rotting tooth. No dentists, no painkillers, nothing. And a belief, taught by real doctors, that was somehow even more frightening than the pain itself. They taught that the agony was caused by tiny, invisible creatures called toothworms, burrowing down into your jaw and chewing on the living nerve. And to kill them, you went back, once again, to the fire. Medieval medical texts held today in the Wellcome collection describe the treatment exactly. A physician would drop toxic henbane seeds onto burning coals, then aim the hot narcotic smoke through a metal funnel straight into the rotting hole in your tooth. In his mind, he was smoking the demons out of your skull. And henbane is loaded with scopolamine and hyoscine, two of the most powerful hallucinogens and painkillers in the natural world. So did it work? In a way, yes. The smoke did not kill a single toothworm because there were never any toothworms. But it got the patient so profoundly, dizzyingly high that they simply stopped caring that their face was rotting off their head. And it was never only teeth. Century after century, healers burned herbs and had the sick breathe the fumes over fevers, over plague, over every pain that had no name and no cure. For almost all of human history, the line between medicine, poison, and magic did not exist. There was only the fire, the plants, and the desperate universal human faith that if you breathed the right smoke, something invisible and terrible might finally let you go. And then something happened that would have horrified every shaman who ever lived. The sacred plant got on a boat. When Europeans reached the Americas, they found tobacco sitting at the center of an entire spiritual world, and they saw something else completely. They saw money. Within a couple of centuries, the plant that had been blown as an offering to gods was stripped of every ritual, sweetened, wrapped in paper, stamped with a logo, and sold on a street corner to anyone with a coin. The bridge to the spirit world became a 15-minute break. The medicine became the single, deadliest product in human history. But here is the thing the marketing never understood. It works on you for the exact same reason it worked 50,000 years ago. That part has never changed. Not once. And that is what brings us all the way back to you. Today, right now, you step outside for 5 minutes. You pull out a cigarette or a vape. You glance at your phone, and you tell yourself this is just a modern bad habit, a weakness, a vice invented by advertising and stress. But modern psychology has a much older name for what you're actually doing. It's called cognitive regulation. You are reaching for a harsh chemical on the outside to force a change in the chemistry on the inside. And it is the exact same move your ancestors made in that freezing cave. Every single time. When the inside of your head becomes unbearable, you reach for something outside it to make it stop. You just do it for smaller reasons now. You smoke because an email ruined your afternoon. They smoked because their guts were full of worms that were killing them. You take a drag on a cold sidewalk to steal 5 minutes away from your boss. They sat inside a sealed tent and breathed burning cannabis to survive the grief of burying a child. You do it to get through a Tuesday. They did it to get through a life that could end violently at any moment. We traded parasites for anxiety and a shared fire for a lonely smoke break in a parking lot. But the reflex underneath has not changed in 50,000 years. The same helpless human urge to pull something dangerous into your body just to feel for 1 minute a little bit different. It's there in the smoke break outside the hospital. It's in the vape glowing red in a parked car at midnight. It's in every promise to quit tomorrow, meant with your whole heart and broken anyway. It started with a shivering circle of people in a freezing cave 50,000 years ago, choking on wood smoke just to stay warm enough to live through the night. And somehow, that hazard became a weapon against the worms inside them. The weapon became a medicine. The medicine became a way to reach their gods and to hold on to their dead. And all of it, every accident and every ritual and every desperate cure, rolled down through 1,000 generations and became you. Lying awake in the dark, reaching for a chemical just to switch your own brain off for the night. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are doing what humans have always done, since before we could write, since before we could farm, since before we were even fully ourselves. You're breathing.